Welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoia here from the Sooner Scoop Studios, and the time has finally come. Well, it's going to be hard to, I guess, wait, 14 months, 12 months until the season actually kind of gets here, July 1 of 2024, but we have a schedule. Oklahoma has a schedule now. When you see the names Alabama, when you see the names Tennessee, it starts getting a little bit more real. South Carolina on the home slate as well. And then obviously the 4 away games, the 4 road games. I think if you asked any Oklahoma fan, like the places that they wanted to go realistically, the Grove is obviously up there. Baton Rouge at night is obviously up there. A place I've never been, Auburn, Alabama. That's going to be certainly interesting. And then Missouri, which is kind of a friendly foe as far as a old Big 8 brethren, if you will. So I guess let's just start there, George. Your overall thoughts when you saw the schedule, you finally get it out there. The Texas game, obviously, technically a home game for Oklahoma, but just your overall thoughts on the schedule reveal that Oklahoma got on Wednesday night.
It's going to be a lot more difficult. That was my initial reaction. I mean, I think the rumors were out there for now a couple of weeks about obviously Alabama coming to Norman. That's the one that I think pops out first it's going to be the biggest home game since Ohio State, probably. And I would say it's bigger than that. You think of the Notre Dame game. Was that 2012? Yeah. So it's in that range, right, of that type of opponent. Tennessee coming to town, the Josh Heupel storyline, I think that's incredible. Tennessee's also playing really good football right now. I mean, that's going to be a really tough game. South Carolina, Shane Beamer. I actually shot him a text when it came out and just said, looking forward to seeing you back in Norman. And he just sent back, let's go, with about 20 exclamation marks.
I did the same. I thought I was going to be the only person that did that. Damn it. It's going to be good to see Shane Beamer. I kind of hinted, I was like, well, we might see here in about a month's time if we go out to SEC Media Days. But it certainly is going to be interesting. I think that, when you look at the schedule overall, obviously it's going to be tough. You see the names. What did people expect, though, at the same time? Like, you weren't going to get the Vanderbilts of the world. And I know that even if you saw Vanderbilt, I think that there's some people that would have, gasped a little bit just as far as them being an SEC opponent. It is what it is. Like, you missed Florida. You miss Arkansas, which, I think everybody could have their own debate on if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I would have enjoyed seeing a matchup in Fayetteville or Norman. Either way, you will get those teams, though. With what the SEC is going to try to do as far as scheduling goes. So this is going to just be the first kind of installment of what is to come.
Yeah, and, what I understand, too, is that it's 8 games right now, 8 conference games. I think as soon as 2025, we're going to see this switch to 9, and you're going to see, I think it's 3 permanent opponents, right? And I would assume, obviously Texas is one of them. I think Missouri is going to be one of them. And then it's probably a Florida, Arkansas, something like that that's not on the schedule right now. So it's going to flip-flop. I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there saying, well, Texas got the easier of the 2 schedules. And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But there's no easy schedule, right, in the SEC. I mean, these road games, though, for Oklahoma, if you want to dive into some of those, I mean, going to Auburn, I don't think Auburn's program is what they have been in the past, but they've got great players.
Sure.
I think that's going to be a crazy environment.
They're all going to be formidable.
Oh, I mean, every single one of them.
All of them. It's kind of funny, and it's hard to talk about, like, what's going to be the trap game without actually having dates, without actually seeing what is out there. But I do think that, like, going to Oxford or going to Auburn or even going to a Missouri, they're all interesting in the aspect of it's just something new. And I think that it's going to be kind of fun to see how that's navigated. It is going to be certainly important that Oklahoma bounces back from a 6-7 season, just in terms of overall feel for what the university is right now and what the program is. I think that, when you look at last year and when you look at everything that happened with this football team, they played really good football at times. We talked about it on the Unofficial 40 this week with Josh and Carey, just as far as it's hard for me to go back through all these games that we've been logging over in the other room. And it's like, how did you lose in Morgantown? How did you lose the big lead in Lubbock? How did you, and outside of Fort Worth, outside of, the Cotton Bowl experience, they're in every one of these games. They're in every single one of them. And if you look at just inability to either move the sticks offensively or get off the field on third down. It's just it's almost kind of aggravating looking back at it, but the only thing that you can do is look forward, and it seems like just being around the program here over the last couple of weeks as far as Brent Venables football camps go, it does seem like everybody kind of knows where they need to be, if that makes sense. There is a level of comfort going into the second year under Brent Venables.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is a big year, right, Eddie? I mean, this is we can look forward to the SEC all we want and what's going to happen there in 2024. But you look back at this last year, obviously not the season they wanted to have. They still bring in a really good recruiting class. But what can they bring in this year if they do have a 10-2? And I know you guys talked a little bit on the Unofficial 40 about the schedule and how this year it really lines up for them to have a nice year.
Yeah.
And when you look at the schedule in 2024, you're saying, 8-4, 9-3 would be a really good year with that type of schedule. So this season's massive in terms of building that momentum. If you can go win 10 games this year, play in a Big 12 title game, then maybe you're looking at landing a top 5 recruiting class, bringing in some of those guys that you're going to need to compete in the SEC. So this season's massive, Eddie. And you look at, again, just comparing this schedule this year to the one in 2024. I mean, road games at Cincinnati, Iowa State at home, you go to Kansas. Then all of a sudden the next season you're in Baton Rouge, which is probably going to be a night game,
sure.
Right? You're in Missouri, who, Missouri's not been, a great opponent, but they're probably as good as a lot of teams in the Big 12. I mean, you're going to Ole Miss, who's, doing really well under Lane Kiffin. I mean, this is such a difficult schedule. So doing well this year is so important for this team and recruiting and everything that goes into that, building some momentum going into what is going to be, just a really difficult schedule in the SEC. But, as a fan, as somebody, as us media that cover the team, you've got to be excited, right? I mean, yeah. I don't even know how to comprehend, and we can even get into what the non-conference opponents look like too. I know that they're getting close to figuring that out, but
yeah, let's go there. Let's go there, because there's in 2024, you have the 7 conference games, right? Mm-hmm. You have 8 conference games. I keep thinking 4 and 3 because that Texas game hangs out there, but you have the 8 conference games. You have Temple and Tulane already on the schedule in 2024, and you've done a little bit of reporting on this, just as far as you're going to have to add a third non-conference at some point, and then B, you're going to have to add a Power 5 team or an independent, technically. And I think there was a lot of people that go, oh, that's going to be Army. And I think that you had kind of hinted at that a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
That doesn't seem to be the case now.
No, I can tell you. So there's a list of potential teams that they could do, because there's only so many that have openings.
Okay.
It's not going to be Army.
Damn it.
It's not going to be Northwestern. And
I wanted Northwestern.
So did I.
I wanted Northwestern. I wanted to go to Chicago. Selfishly, that was a selfish, I didn't really care where they played, Soldier Field or in Evanston. It didn't really matter to me, but it doesn't seem like that's off the table, even though it seemed like what we had talked about, that was going to be almost like a picture perfect scenario.
Yes. Yeah. It lined up to where Northwestern has an opening. I've just been told that it's likely not going to happen. Dang. And the other one that I thought as of this morning was going to maybe be it, Washington, I've been told that is also likely not going to happen. They had an opening.
Which is another fun trip that everybody has talked about.
Would have been awesome.
Back in 2009 or 2008.
The teams that are left available, and we can do process of elimination here. Boston College, who they have 2 Power 5 opponents already lined up, so I've kind of crossed them off the list.
But if they want to go play at Fenway, I would not be opposed to that.
Could you imagine? I would love a trip.
That would be awesome.
NC State, but they are playing Tennessee in Charlotte.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like that's something that would work out for both sides.
Correct.
And that's the toughest thing, is finding somebody that it seems like will work both ways. And something was asked to me this morning. Let's get through these teams, and then I'll ask you what I was thinking of.
Duke, which currently the only Power 5 school they have is at Northwestern. Rutgers, they have an opening, and the only Power 5 they have is at Virginia Tech. And then there's Houston and TCU, which I think are they would make a lot of sense, right? I just don't know if the Big 12 wants them to go ahead and play Oklahoma or Texas. If they're open to that, it makes all the sense in the world to just go to Houston or go to TCU.
Now, there were allowances or whatever you want to call it that were in the agreement when OU and Texas left, that OU and Texas would end up starting to play some of these teams. But
Correct.
I thought maybe that was the old guard, wasn't it? As far as like a TCU or an Oklahoma State or, any of the schools that are currently in the Big 12, not the new teams.
Yes, I think that's correct. I would have to double check that, but it just if you're Houston or TCU, I don't know why you wouldn't want to schedule. If you're Houston, why would you not want to schedule a game? Go play at NRG.
Sure.
You take however percent of the profits, whatever it is. I mean, you're probably going to sell that game out. We saw that. Was it 2016 they went down there?
Yep.
So
it didn't work out very well.
Well,
it kind of backfired on Oklahoma, didn't it?
Right. So I think that would work. And then here's 3 other teams that I'm just going to throw out there because Joe C has hinted at that there's several teams that aren't technically have openings, but maybe they can wiggle out of space. And I limited them down to 3 teams because these 3 teams don't have currently a Power 5 opponent on their schedule. So maybe they just cancel one of their FCS games or whatever. Washington State, Syracuse, and Ohio State. Now, Ohio State
I think you can probably mark one of those off.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but I included them just for, what the hell. But could you imagine Ohio State on that already brutal schedule? And I think it is going to be whoever the Power 5 game is. I do think it'll be a road game. I think the other home game is going to be like an FCS school.
Sure. And that would make a lot of sense because I wouldn't think that Oklahoma would play technically 7 home games in Norman. And technically, I guess it would be, So it'll be interesting. I would love to see OU Washington State, I guess, doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Now, let me ask you this. Will they be just looking for a one-off game? Like, they're not going to start working in a return trip or a 2-for-1 or anything like that.
Well, they could. They have an opening in 2027, so maybe they do a home and home. But if say it's Houston or TCU, I could see that game being played technically at a neutral site, right? Like you go to Houston, you play Energy Stadium.
Sure.
Maybe you play TCU at Jerry World.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a game that you do. I don't know. So maybe you do something like that and you find a neutral field. But if you get NC State, Duke, or Rutgers, which are the other 3 teams that I think might be possible, I think you're going to their stadiums. Like I think.
I guess Rutgers would be kind of a MetLife thing, or
maybe
do they play all their home games at MetLife? I really don't know.
I don't think.
Do they play over in Piscataway at their own stadium?
I'm not really sure.
I'm sure the Rutgers people on YouTube would be real.
None of those
fired
games
up that
really fun. I mean, NC State would be fun.
Yeah.
Trip to Duke would be, I guess, cool. Yeah. Much rather be like basketball. But,
sure.
I don't know. I personally think Houston makes the most sense. I just don't know what the Big 12 thinks of that.
Yeah, and I don't know what somebody like a Dana Holgerson would even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I do think they're going to make an announcement here in the next week, 2 weeks, probably. I know they want to get it done before the season starts.
So there is something out there at least,
yes.
Right? I mean, it would seem that there is movement to get that done, and especially as soon as possible for something as far out as a scheduling item like that.
Yeah. No, I know Joe is. I mean, it was funny. We were at the Board of Regents meeting, and I was talking to him, and he's like, "Actually, I have to take a call right now about scheduling."
Sure.
So it's like he's been on top of it, and I think that we're going to find out here very shortly. And again, maybe it's not one of those teams I listed. It's just connecting dots here. It seems like it's going to be one of those 4 or 5 teams.
Well, and on top of all that, the other 2 non-conference teams that year in 2024 are already on the table as far as Temple and Tulane, which, I don't think that it's the hardest schedule in the entire world, but, who knows? Maybe a Tulane jumps up and gets you or almost gets you like they did back in 2020 at the beginning of the COVID season.
Yeah, and one thing I'd also throw out there.
It's a good program.
That just popped up as we're doing this, but the San Diego State news, maybe they're going to be a Power 5. I mean, maybe there's new Power 5 teams that we get realignment here in the next few weeks, and all of a sudden there's a new Power 5 school. I have no idea. So I just know I can tell you that Army, Northwestern, and Washington have essentially been crossed off the list.
Interesting. Well, it's been a really fascinating kind of, I guess, experience to see how everything has kind of unfolded as far as the reveal of the 2024 schedule. It started that was the first kind of taste of okay, this is starting to get a little bit real. It does suck, though, that you're not, I guess, really having to or being able to capitalize on that as much as you would if, this season was right around the corner. You still got an entire football season to play, and there's so much that is going to be different, I guess, as far as, who the quarterback is. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel will probably be gone by the time that Oklahoma starts this 2024 schedule. Do you really want a Jackson Arnold making his first start in Baton Rouge on the road, or, at home against an Alabama or a Tennessee? I am kind of interested to see how that schedule comes together and who, like when those buys are, when, obviously, who's after OU Texas?
Yeah.
The week before OU Texas.
Who's the last opponent?
Sure.
You see that in the
SEC. That rivalry weekend or whatever.
Is Missouri now going to be that, Thanksgiving weekend type of opponent?
Sure.
I think that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, is OU going to open up with Alabama and it be a primetime night game, or are they going to have to go to LSU to start their SEC schedule? It's going to be fascinating to see what dates come out, and like you said, who do they play before and after OU Texas? Because obviously that's the biggest game of the year oftentimes. So, man, it's gonna be fun, and I think OU too. And if you want to get into this too, Eddie, they're preparing this year, obviously on the field, and we're like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how the roster shakes out. Maybe they get some guys to come in to help them compete. But I can tell you from a university perspective, they're already preparing for the SEC this season. I was out at the Board of Regents meeting. President Joe Harris talked a lot about tailgating.
Yes.
I know that you're leading the charge there.
Absolutely. I mean, it started out as a little bit of a bit. Let's be honest. It was kind of a funny bit. Make Lindsay Street great again. You can see the flags. We still have some of those on sale, too, in the Sooner Scoop store if you want to stop. But it's a fun thing to do. But at the end of the day, the game day atmosphere, the everything surrounding the program right now, you have to take a step up. I mean, it is starting to become a little bit real as you go to the SEC, and I think that tailgating is something that it's not. It became so real, it's not a bit anymore, and it is a very serious, not necessarily performance-based thing, because I do think when you're not 6 and 7, the crowds are obviously going to be better. The crowds are going to be better when Tennessee comes to town, as opposed to insert whatever team. I'm not trying to disrespect any of our Big 12 brethren or former Big 12 brethren, but it's different. It hits a little bit different when an Alabama's coming to town than it does an Iowa State, and particularly when that game's not being played at 10:30 in the morning.
Right. Well, and I think OU realizes that. At least they admitted the other day they realized that. And Joe Harris, I mean, it was on the agenda item basically that they're trying to update the policies, I think is what it was. And I asked specifically, what does that mean? And he just said, it's going to be bigger. It's going to be more fun. And I said, bigger, does that mean there's going to be, new open areas, potentially Lindsay Street? And he said, everything's on the table, I think was his direct quote. So we'll see, Eddie. I mean, I think that opening Lindsay Street would be awesome.
Yeah.
I think opening up parts of the South Oval would be awesome.
I will meet them halfway. If they don't want to open up Lindsay Street, and they did open up some portion of the South Oval, I think that could be pretty cool.
I think
it's a short walk over to the stadium. You're really not, David Bourne probably would feel a little bit differently about this, but you're not going to run the beautification of the South Oval. They've already stopped kind of spending money on that in that area. Not to say that it's ugly or anything, but it's not the pristine lawn that it used to be.
Yeah.
I think everybody knows that.
What did Brent say? Brent said on his show on ESPN Plus the other night something about the grass will grow back, I think was one of his quotes. And he talked about the tailgating and in the SEC. And,
that's all the Grove is.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. I think you could turn the South Oval into a Grove type atmosphere if you really wanted to.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen at the snap of a finger. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think that if there is kind of almost a welcoming in of the fraternities, of the sororities, there is a greater opportunity that area becomes fun. That's a place where you can take recruits over and kind of walk them through everything.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate, the team walk even coming over from maybe where the buses leave them? Can you imagine Lindsay Street and everybody walking through?
Be awesome.
It would be great. I think that kind of sets a tone for what you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, it does seem like the powers that be, whether it be a Joe Harris or it be a Joe Castiglione or whoever is making
even
this
Brent.
decision.
I think Brent is very involved in this stuff.
100%. And at the end of the day, they know that it has to get better. They know that the game day atmosphere has to get better. They know that it has to be a little bit more welcoming. They know that, everything that kind of goes into what everybody thinks is a game day atmosphere, it could be better. Now, it helps when you get off the field on third down. It helps when you're able to score the football. So I think it all kind of coincides together, and I think that that's why, we just did a hit for On 3 earlier today, and there is momentum, it seems like, moving towards 2024, and everything's going to kind of peak during that season when the move is officially made. But if you go back out there onto the field and you go 3-9, or God forbid, or I mean 9-3 this year, or God forbid, you go 7-6 again, or 6-7, or whatever, you don't meet those lofty expectations of what they should be in Norman. There's going to be problems, and there's going to be, I think, a sense of worry and a sense of dread almost when they do make that move if you don't take care of things over the next 12 months or however many it is until you make that move in July of next year.
Well, yeah, and you just, and we talked about it earlier, you cannot go into the SEC without moment. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, that is one thing you cannot do. And so this season is so massive for that, and that, again, that goes for on the field performance. And I think the tailgate, I mean, Joe Harris, again, was talking about how this year is so pivotal for them to make sure that they are, quote unquote, SEC ready. And I think that you're going to see that in everything they do. So I don't know, man, it's going to be interesting. I was going to ask you, Eddie, if you could fix tailgating, OU tailgating in one move, do one thing, what would it be?
Probably, I think at the end of the day, it needs to be more accommodating. And I think that maybe, I don't know if that's the right word to say. I think that it's probably a situation where, I think that people do get a little confused. They have a tailgating area. Yeah. What would that be? Northeast of the stadium, on the east side of the stadium, kind of the north area, off of White. I can't remember what street that is over there, but it just needs to be expanded. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe even more so, a little bit more welcoming to, people that maybe you wouldn't want your kids to be, like young children to be hanging out and seeing. But I think it's also part of a culture too. Like, not overnight, you're not going to turn this thing into the Grove. It's just not going to be that way. But at the same time, I do think that there are certain things that you're able to do that you can make a move to where, and whether it be Lindsay Street or whether it be the South Oval, wherever, that you can put together that makes an atmosphere that transfers over into the stadium, that keeps the students there until the end of the fourth quarter. And I think that is a culture thing within the students. It was a problem when you were in school. Yep. It was a problem when I was in school. I was part of that problem because Oklahoma was usually winning football games 60-10 at the end of the third quarter or whatever it was. And you would go, okay, you ready to head over to the bar? You ready to head to 7? You ready to head to O'Connell's? Wherever. It's going to be a little bit different when you're biting your fingernails at the beginning of the fourth quarter against an Auburn or against an Alabama or against a Tennessee. I think that there is a kind of rejuvenation of within the program right now that everybody can feel, but it only goes to a certain extent if the guys that suit up on Saturdays aren't kind of beating those expectations, which are quite lofty at Oklahoma. I know that there's been a lot of people that have been a little bit surprised when Brent made the comment of winning 9 or 10 games this year, and I know there's some national people that kind of go, why would you put those expectations on yourself when in reality that's kind of the expectation every year when you're coaching at a place like Oklahoma. Well,
and if they don't win 9 games this year, there are some serious issues in my opinion. I mean, unless we see some teams just totally exceed expectations, and you see maybe some key injuries to Oklahoma, but I think you're right, Eddie. And I think there's this perception out there, Eddie, that the fan base isn't ready for the SEC, and maybe they aren't. I don't know, but I think from having seen Oklahoma through the years, you've seen this fan base. I think of the Notre Dame game in 2012, Ohio State. I mean, people show up. Yeah, and when the football team is good, and even when they're not good. I mean, I didn't go to the games last year, but it looked like the stands, it was full every game, and the student section probably wasn't full every game.
It wasn't barren by any means.
Right. And, and the other thing I would also mention is the university is preparing for more students. I mean, they were talking
Sure.
about that at the Board of Regents meeting.
Interesting.
That the attendance, they are expecting to go up to about 40,000 people, 40,000
Really?
kids. Yeah. And I don't know how long that'll take to get to that point, but they're basically saying that that's what's going to happen when they make the move to the SEC, which is great, right? I mean, you get more students. The atmospheres on game days are just going to be wild when you talk about having more students. Obviously, these fan bases are going to travel. I mean, I can't imagine how many.
That's
Alabama
what
fans.
I'm kind of sort of most interested in especially in 2024 is, and granted, I think that we know how many people Alabama's going to bring. They travel just like Oklahoma does. And I think that that's something even that I don't know if I take for granted, but I think people almost take for granted as far as when we go travel, and you'll get back kind of into this mode as well. And you saw it as a reporter when you were here during your undergrad, as far as OU travels extremely well.
Yep.
The crowds up in South Bend, the crowds in Knoxville, the crowds even in Tallahassee back in 2011, people travel to Oklahoma football games. And obviously it's because of the national brand that comes with it, everything that goes with the conglomerate, the power machine that is Oklahoma football. But I'm kind of excited to see how South Carolina extends, Tennessee. Obviously, OU Texas is a major deal down in Dallas. You have to go if you've never been. It's going to be kind of fun. And I think, on the flip side of that, OU fans are already talking about going down to Oxford. They're already talking about going down to Baton Rouge. They're already talking about going to Auburn. It's going to be a lot of fun to see kind of that first year is going to be kind of, I think, about as crazy as this thing has been just from a not really knowing what to expect kind of mode.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite place you're looking forward to going in 2024?
I'm excited to see Oxford just because I want to see the Grove.
Yeah.
But I think I would be hard-pressed not to admit that Baton Rouge on a Saturday night, I think that is – I know that Oklahoma fans aren't too excited about seeing their lovely friends from LSU like they were down in the Sugar Bowl down on Bourbon Street, where they, I think everybody has talked about how they weren't treated too kindly.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see kind of how all that comes together down in Baton Rouge for a night game, just because everybody talks about it as an experience that you have to go to if you're a fan of big-time college football.
Yeah. What
about you?
LSU is number one.
For sure.
I got asked that in the mailbag a couple of weeks ago. I was like, which one? And I was like, LSU is number one.
100%.
The Swamp would have been awesome, and eventually they'll make a trip to the Swamp, I'm sure. I think Ole Miss will be great just for the tailgating scene. I don't know what the actual game atmosphere will be like, but in terms of tailgating, I mean, you have to mention Oxford.
Sure.
And then Auburn. What's the name of the stadium at Auburn?
Jordan Hare.
I mean, it looks electric. Now, the only time I really actually watch Auburn has been the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
So
if it can come anything close to the kick six, that's one of the all-time college football clips that's out there, right?
Don't they have the eagle? Does the eagle fly around the stadium or something? I mean, that's just the traditions in the SEC.
PETA might have that done by the time that Oklahoma rolls out there in 2024. But we shall see. As far as the home schedule, and real quick, I'm interested to see what that week of Tennessee is going to be like, and if they do any type of honoring of Josh Heupel. It's been cataloged before just how weird everything was when he did leave. How icy that relationship was, the divorce, if you will, from Oklahoma and Josh Heupel. But I think everybody to a man, in seeing the success that he had in Knoxville this year, and it's easy to say this with OU not in the SEC, I was cheering for him. It's fun to see that type of success for somebody that brought so much, pride and joy to what was a downtrodden program in 1999.
Yeah, and I think they should honor him. I think they'll probably. I think they will.
Yeah.
That seems like something right up Joe C's alley, and just the program and the universities that they'll do some sort of tribute to him. Now, I think Josh Heupel still probably doesn't care too much for the university.
I think that I don't know that for a fact, but I think that that's probably fair.
Yeah, and look, it's going to be interesting to see how the fan base reacts.
Right.
Because I'll tell you a personal experience is. So when Heupel was the offensive coordinator, I was in, I think, high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just, an OU fan. And my dad, oh, man, he's not going to like that I'm sharing this story. But he did not like Josh Heupel towards the end of his tenure, and I would say most OU fans didn't.
Well, I think that somebody had to be the scapegoat for what had become a very anemic offense. Let's be honest. That's what it was. It wasn't because Josh couldn't coach, and it's the same thing with Mike Stoops. It's like, and I know that there's going to be people that lose their mind over that. Mike Stoops still a good football coach.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just like last season. I don't think 6 and 7 reflects what Brent Venables, what Todd Bates, what Ted Roof, that group is.
Brent Venables didn't just forget how to coach defense, right?
Right.
And so that's what you kind of have to hold on to, the hopeful, that it'll be better. Anyways, my dad was not a big Josh Heupel fan, and I vividly remember towards the end of that season him at games yelling that Josh Heupel needs to be fired.
Right. One of those fans.
Yes. And so I'm very interested to see, because I think that, again, the fan base, it's been some time now, almost 10 years, right? Or I guess it will be 10 years when he comes, since he's been let go.
God, that's crazy.
I know. And so, I think most people will be cordial, but I think also there's probably still a group of OU fans in the back of their heads like, yeah, he just was not a good. And I think there's probably still some that are like, I can't believe the success that he's had. And I didn't think, when he left, that he would end up being, a head coach at a program like Tennessee and have the success that he's had so far. I mean, he's done a really good job with that program. So that to me is maybe, other than the Alabama game, which is just an awesome game, it's going to be cool to see them here. That to me is maybe the number one storyline of the schedule is the SEC saying, hey, we're going to send Tennessee to Norman for that moment.
Yeah, for sure. And then OU Texas with an SEC logo on the field at the Cotton Bowl. I mean,
it's going to be awesome. I do wonder, because, and I haven't been to OU Texas now in several years. What has been the logo at midfield? I can't remember seeing it on TV. I wonder if they put an SEC logo, or because it used to be like the little cotton ball. Yeah. And then I think it used to be like Red River Showdown some years. I don't know. But it would be awesome.
I've erased all memory from the 2022 Cotton Bowl experience.
Well,
so
I think most have.
Yeah. Well,
most in Norman, at least.
Yeah. Definitely. On one side of the Red River, everybody's forgetting it, for sure. All right. Well, anything else from the Board of Regents meeting? I know that the tailgating thing was kind of the big story coming out of that. A lot of it was a lot of kind of just checking boxes, and Jenny Baranchek got a raise. I know that there was a lot of coaching salary raises that were approved. But, I think that's kind of the run of the mill during the summer. Yeah. It's pretty normal for all that kind of stuff. Joe C. was being honored for, 25 years of service with the university?
Which it seems like he's been honored for that several times, which is great. Joe, I don't want to sound like Joe shouldn't be recognized.
We're done with that. We're done with that. Turn this football team around, all right?
Exactly. But, there's some NIL stuff. Nothing too crazy. Basically just, again, checking boxes that, there was the new NIL law basically saying they're going to comply within those rules, which is, basically they're having no rules.
Being in the SEC now, you kind of just wink, and you sign that and you don't do it.
That's pretty much what's going on. The new women's gymnastics facility basically has gotten approved, which it was already approved, but they're going to start construction soon. And then, like you said, there were several coaches. I think KJ Kindler got a raise as well, the women's gymnastics coach. So nothing too much. The tailgating thing popped up kind of out of nowhere. Yeah. So that kind of was the story of the day, and then obviously it just so happened to be the same day as the SEC schedule release.
Very good. Well, we have a big weekend ahead here in Norman. Obviously, David Stone's on campus, the top-rated defensive tackle in the 2024 class. There's a bunch of guys that we saw coming into camp very slowly here at the end of the week. Devon Mitchell,
massive
kid from
human.
Los Al out in California and Los Angeles. He is, yes, a very massive human and was getting a lot of attention, and rightfully so. But Josh McCutcheon will have a lot more on that on the Crimson Corner here, wrapping up what is a massive recruiting weekend in Norman with 28 visitors for the barbecue. So for George Stoia, I'm Eddie Radosevich. Stay right here on Sooner Scoop on 3 Network.